Welcome back to State of the Nation. Our bright-eyed and bushy-tailed new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, made his debut in European diplomacy today, using an international summit at Blenheim Palace to address the continent's most pressing issue of illegal migration, as well as a bit of virtue signalling on climate change and energy policy. However, the Prime Minister always used his platform at the birthplace of Sir Winston Churchill to call for closer ties with the EU. Our famously Brexit-phobic head of government made his case for a, quote, reset post-Brexit, declaring, under my leadership, Britain will be a friend and a partner, ready to work with you, not part of the European Union, but very much part of Europe. Arch Remainer Sir Keir is by his own reckoning seeking to distance himself from the previous Conservative government's approach to European relations, such as dismantling the possibility of withdrawing from human rights agreements. However, when considering the vague, non-committal term reset in the context of the Prime Minister's own record on European affairs, while he specifies not part of the European Union, but very much part of Europe, it is clear that he is returning Britain into EU jurisdiction through a combination of stealth and domestic measures. Keir Starmer's historic record as Shadow Brexit Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn, whom he has served but subsequently expelled from the Labour Party, displayed a wish to reverse Brexit. He was even committed to a second referendum. Writing for the Evening Standard during the 2019 general election campaign, he said, in the first Queen's speech of a Labour government, we will immediately introduce legislation for a referendum to take place. That referendum will take place as soon as possible and no later than 6 months from a Labour government taking office. This may be old hat, but today his newly appointed Minister for European Union Relations, Nick Thomas-Symonds, said Brexit tarnished the UK's global reputation and that the UK is turning inwards when actually Britain should always be turning outwards to the world. And just this week, Starmer took a stealthier approach to bring us back under the European yoke. The Economist's Matthew Holhouse highlighted the explanation of some legislation from yesterday's King's speech which would allow ministers unilaterally to mirror future EU product standards. Watch out for your smoky bacon crisps. This is partly because of the Windsor Framework, and it already sees this happening in Northern Ireland, where EU law comes into effect automatically. This, in effect, reverses the post-Brexit powers of regulating our own goods for our own consumption and would allow any future regulation set by the EU, which we have no say in determining, effectively to be adopted by default and with minimal scrutiny. It's further evidence that the blob is still in charge. The scenes from the Commons yesterday of Rishi Sunak and Oliver Dowding laughing away with Sir Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner on the way to hear the King's speech was a visual representation of the minimal difference between the old administration and the new. The Starmer effort simply seeks to enable their progressive leftist agenda further. The British people did not vote to leave the EU so that ministers could streamline EU regulations into statute with minimal scrutiny from elected MPs. Indeed, in His Majesty's new Labour government, our main representative on the world stage, Mr David Lammy, tried to subvert the will of the British people before the process had even begun. He urged Parliament to reject the result of the referendum, stating the result was advisory and attempting to move the goalposts just because he didn't like the outcome.
Last week's referendum was an advisory referendum, given, frankly, that we had a referendum that should have been a two-thirds majority for such a constitutional change. And I'm very clear, I will not vote for Brexit in this country on behalf of my constituents and let down the young people of Britain. I won't do it.
With our two primary spokesmen on the world stage having a long history of wanting to delegitimise the result of the EU referendum, it's crucial that Brexiteers in the House of Commons and outside do not allow Keir Starmer to take Britain back into the EU via the gradual cessation of powers and resubjection to European regulations. Brexit was too hard fought to be relinquished through the back door. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com.